free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tamar. I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement, and this is the Cutting Ties with Zionism in the Workplace panel workshop. So we're really excited to have you all here and to have our wonderful panelists. We are in a perfect city to be talking about radical organizing for the working class, isn't that right? And for many other struggles for liberation, the Black struggle, the Chicano struggle, Puerto Rican struggle, and the Palestinian struggle. Detroit is the home of the first strike for Palestine in this country, which was, does anyone know what year that was?
1973!
1973, exactly. So the United Auto Workers Wildcat strike was initiated when Detroit's growing Arab working class population who worked at the Dodge main plant heard that their union had not only purchased thousands of dollars in Israeli state bonds, but their president was being given an award by a Zionist organization.
Dang.
So what did they decide to do? They decided to walk off the job. Inspired by the militancy of the Black-led Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, DRUM, in the city who had organized wildcat strikes previously, the Arab workers walked off the job, agitated others to do the same, and the result was that the production line at Dodge Main was shut down for a day.
That's right.
So we remember this history now. Just a little over a week ago, there was a massive vote at California's largest employer to authorize the first union-sanctioned strike in solidarity with the movement for Palestine at UAW 4811. Against the fascist repression led by the UC system and by the cops. And we have some 4811 members here. I don't know if you want to stand up real quick, give us a wave. You'll hear more from them at the 5 p.m. panel, so come through. The 73 Wildcat strike in Detroit is reiterated time and time again as a turning point in worker-led actions that had a material impact on both the point of production and on the advancement of the working class and Palestinian struggle. There's a lot more to the history of working class action for Palestine in this city, but I'm sure many people in the room can tell you more about that at some point. We look to the militancy of this history as we, in 2024, assess how workers can make a material impact on cutting ties with Zionism in the workplace and wherever we are. Though we all know that the US labor movement is not what it was in 1973, but we're gonna get it back up. Are we? And we saw a reinvigoration of the labor movement in 2020 in light of the crises of capitalism that the pandemic made evident, as Brandi can get a little bit more into later at Starbucks. And the genocide against our people has been another such moment for labor organizing and advancing the working class struggle. So we've been in the depths of this hell for the past 8 months, trying to figure out what we can do to stop the genocide. Though the multitude of ceasefire resolutions have been an incredible start, we urgently need to do more and think of ways to build more power. We have seen multiple calls emerge from Palestinian trade unions, urging workers in the West to do whatever they can to halt weapons productions, to drop union-held Zionist bonds, and more. What the past 8 months has made clear is where we are and how we need to grow. And in the past 8 months, what we have seen are incredible advancements in the working class that we in the Palestine movement never thought possible just a few years ago. Workers across nearly all sectors have seen the varying ways that their workplaces are complicit in Zionism. Our panelists today will talk about the ways that they have organized to fight this, from the point of production at UAW, to the tech industry at Google, to the realm of consumption at Starbucks, and finally to the perpetually fraught territory of public education in San Francisco. So we sit here in the spirit of the late Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement and League of Revolutionary Black Workers leader, General Baker. I think we might have the children of General Baker here today. I don't know if you were able to make it, but shout out to you if you're here. General Baker chanted these famous lines to workers on the floor of the Dodge main plant. And feel free to jump in if you know them. Finally got the news, how your dues are being used. Be bad, can't do nothing if you ain't bad. So with that, I want to introduce the baddest of our panelists who have been doing incredible work to make good trouble at their workplace. I'll introduce them and then I'll present a question to them and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I also want to note that there's been a panelist change, as you might have seen. The very wonderful and humble Frank Hammer, who's sitting in the front row, who was originally slated to be on the panel, who has been in the UAW for almost 50 years, who has so many lessons to teach us, has graciously given up his seat to the incredible Pedraza, who's here from UAW 551 in Chicago. Pedraza has been a union electrician for 25 years, starting in the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. In 2013, she joined the UAW and is currently a member of UAW 551 at Ford Chicago Assembly Plant. In her union, she is an active member within the skilled trades, women's election and organizing committees. She's also a member of UAWD. I see we have some other UAWD people here today. Rank and file caucus of UAW. Marcy is a community organizer passionate about environmental and workers' justice and is board president of the Southeast Environmental Task Force, fighting for a cleaner neighborhood. She is an elected chair of the local school council for her neighborhood's elementary school. In 2022, she was given the Cesar Chavez Jane Gonzalez Award from the Latino Workers Leadership Institute at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, for her activism. Welcome, Marcy. And I'm going to go down the list of the other bios, and then Marcy will ask you your question. Next, we have Ariel, Koren, an organizer in the Bay Area with the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and an interpreter and co-founder of Response Crisis Translation. She previously worked in Google Translate and was ousted from the company due to organizing against Google's billion-dollar contract with Israel, Project Nimbus. And next we have Brandi Alduk, who is a New York City organizer and a leader in Starbucks Workers United. A union representing over 10,500 Starbucks workers and growing. 2022. She's currently serving as an elected in-person bargaining delegate. And finally, we have Yajaira Cuapio, who is an educator and organizer with the United Educators of San Francisco, and has been a social worker in San Francisco Unified School District for over 5 years, but has worked in public education for 10. She's currently on the executive board of UESF and was lead negotiator in the recent negotiations. Can you talk about the process you took in preparing the very strong ceasefire statement that UAW Local 551 passed in January? How did you build support for it? What were the conversations like that you had on the shop floor? And can you share any practical organizing tips? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. Power to the people! First, I want to thank this great conference for having me here, and Frank Hammer for graciously giving me his time. He's a legend, he's the OG, so I'm honored to be here, and my fellow panelists as well. We're just coming out of, we're in the middle of our stand-up strike in October when the events happened, and what a great place to talk about current events is then the picket line, right? We're there for hours in the middle of the night or in the day, even though we only had one slot a week to do. I was on the picket line somewhere almost every day because it's right near my house. I live and work in the same neighborhood. A lot of people were just like not really sure or understanding what was going on or how it relates to them. And, since I've been involved in, organizing something for, very young age for many years, I thought this was important to talk about to people, that might not really know the impact it's having, in our world. I first got involved with the Palestine movement, I would say maybe 20 years ago or so, just being from Chicago, it's a huge Palestinian population, many actions. My first time in DC was on a bus with the Arab American Action Network going to DC to march for the Capitol. That's all we did. We rode the bus. I was on a bus with a bunch of women and children. We went to DC and we came right back. So I didn't even get to do anything, touristy, but that's fine. So anyway, going to our resolution at 551, how do you convince rank and file workers to care about Palestine or why we should care and get involved? I just put it simply, like to get educated and not watch mainstream media or pay attention to mainstream media, and to know that this is our tax dollars that are paying for this genocide, right? And while the government and the corporations and everybody's saying we don't have money to take care of the unhoused or public education or infrastructure or universal health care, yet they have billions of dollars for war and destruction, and that ain't right. So it was good to hear in December when the international UAW called for a ceasefire, but I felt like we could take it a step further than that, as other unions were doing, following that. So not just to call for a ceasefire, but to stand with the Palestinian trade unionists in their call to stand with them as workers, worker to worker, right? So this resolution that I didn't write myself, I'm not taking credit for it. There are many other UAW locals that were passing similar resolutions, and I just kind of copied and pasted the highlights and put it together kind of last minute. People were like, how did you do this? I'm like, I don't even know. But, thankful to all the other UAW locals and the mainly on the East Coast and the Palestinian Trade Unionist call. So I came up with this and decided to present it. Well, I wanted to present it at our December local union membership meeting, but we didn't have one because we didn't have quorum. It was a tough time. Everybody was coming back from the strike. It was holiday season. It was winter in Chicago. So I had to wait till January. And the organizing I was doing just briefly, like in little spots I could do. Well, we had a Christmas shutdown, so I couldn't really do anything, at work. Trades had to work, but production wasn't there. So at our union meeting, I was in all the committees meetings before our actual union meeting. So I was just kind of running around table to table, like, hey, I'm gonna present this resolution. I really love your support. And, it's Palestine. I just want to, give them the highlights. They're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I got, my brother, union brother, Scott Olison, who was able, I told him, you got to second it for me, because as we all know, if there's no second, it's not going to the floor to vote, right? So he's just like, yeah, absolutely, no matter, he had my back. So that was always good. Good advice to have a second and ask around for support. So I brought this up, and I just wanted to read a couple of the highlights. I won't read the whole thing. It's short, and it's online if you wanted to look it up. But we, the rank and file members of UAW Local 551, representing automobile production workers, skilled trades, and custodial staff, respond to the Palestinian trade union's urgent call to their international counterparts to pass motions in support of Palestine. And we resolved that we endorse the October 16, 2023 call issued by this coalition of Palestinian trade unions to, number 1, refuse to build weapons destined for Israel. Number 2, refuse to transport weapons to Israel. And number 3, pass motions in their trade union to this effect. Number 4, take action against complicit companies involved in implementing Israel's brutal and illegal siege, especially if they have contracts with their institution. And number 5, pressure governments to stop all military trade with Israel, and in the case of the U.S., funding it. So we call for a permanent ceasefire to end U.S.-backed Israeli genocide in Gaza, and now we call on other labor unions to do the same. So, present to the membership, first I had some people like, what? Well, what about this and what about that? And just a couple people wanted to table this issue later, but after, they brought up the resolution, I had a second. So even though the two wanted to table it for further, a later meeting, we still had to vote on it, and it passed overwhelmingly. I would say, there was only 2 nays in the crowd of about 100. So that was good, but, yeah, and it's been, interesting just to hear other people, after the meeting, people came up to me and what is this all about? What's going on? Why did you present this? I'm like, well, it's important that we, stand with other people that are oppressed. You saw the support we got while we were on the picket line, from the community, from other unions. We should do the same, on a global scale, and it does affect us, whether we, know it or not. And I know workers are worried about jobs and taking care of their families, but we got to think about what these profits are going to, in our tax dollars. And so it's been, a lot of work, amazing work with UAW Labor for Palestine and UAWD, just trying to get, the masses involved and getting to be interested in doing certain actions and things like that. But so we also had, a lot of educational, events within UAWD, just to kind of inform rank and file workers on the history, who, might not know about it, and what we can do about it, as workers. And also I just want to note that, there's some mainstream journalists that want to pit us against each other, right? The manufacturing workers versus legal aid attorneys and the grad workers, which, we're all UAW. And they like to do this, right? To say that this was just the grad workers came up with this, and, it has nothing to do with shop floor workers, which is just not true, right? There's workers all over the country who are mobilizing around this, and we need to keep growing so that we show our strength. But we're all workers at the end of the day, right? We all work for a paycheck. So, and we talk about things like a just transition to a peace economy, and what does that mean? Like I said, we don't want to we want to approach this to workers in a delicate way. We're not trying to close down all these factories. We want to talk about alternatives, things we can be building. As an environmentalist, I care about the world we live in and the pollution and climate change and also environmental racism, which we experience on the southeast side of Chicago. I grew up in a steel mill community, and my parents worked at the mills, my grandparents, and those were great jobs back then and great union jobs, but many of my family had respiratory illnesses, cancer, its highest rates in the country. So what can we be doing what can we be making and producing that's not going to kill us or other people or our planet? Things like that. So high-speed rail, electric buses, electric freight trucks. We have a lot of truck traffic in my neighborhood still. Solar panels, wind turbines, green infrastructure. We shouldn't have to choose between good union jobs and our moral compass or our consciousness. We also organized a couple events around, beside the big, rallies and protests in downtown Chicago, which is seeing thousands of people and it's great. We went to on a smaller scale to South Bend, Indiana to protest a company called AM General, which is represented by UAW workers. But we marched to the company headquarters, demanding, they make Humvees for Israel, demanding, to stand with Palestine, and we didn't. It was about 100 people. So I just wanted to stress that no matter how big or how small, we can make an impact. And next up, we have there's other workers that are organizing around Caterpillar plants throughout Illinois that make other weapons of mass destruction. And it's not just people that are involved in the Palestine movement. It's plumbers, it's tradespeople, it's manufacturing workers. So that's what we're trying to get organized to, more people to get involved and to go and flyer and protest and to get folks educated. We actually have an event coming up next week, next Sunday. It's a Zoom panel for to join other UAW manufacturing and trades workers to discuss the anti-war movement. And I'll have this flyer to share if anyone wants. And I also wanted to share a statement from UAWD that we stand with the protests in the student protests in the U.S. to end Israel's war against the Palestinian people. We're all workers in this together, and we have to stand with each other. Even I've heard some people say like, "Oh, these encampments, like, what are they doing?" Like, well, they're going to try to say that the government and politicians are going to try to say that we're not allowed to protest. Eventually that's what they want to do, right? And we're not allowed to have free speech. And so when does it end? Eventually they're going to say we can't go on strike. So that's why we have to show support for this, because they're attacking our rights, So, anyway. As I told, and I'm running out of time, that there was some pushback, not just on the local level, for my local leadership, the E-Board. Soon after this resolution passed, I said I want to get it on letterhead and put it out on the internet, and so I did. And then right after that, somebody approached me like, can you take that resolution down? I'm like, what do you mean take it down? Like, from the internet, it's there forever. I can't take it down. Because some people were complaining and that, I know it's a controversial subject and they didn't want to take sides. I'm like, well, it's kind of late for that, So, but then as we were trying to get our executive board to vote in support of divesting, what our regional director, I messaged him, I sent him a letter and I messaged him and he told me, well, didn't your resolution get rescinded? Like, I didn't hear about that, and by whom? And I did some investigating with help from other UAW members, and found out that the Illinois Zionists tried to rescind our resolution and from the NLRB. They rejected their request, but now they're appealing it. I didn't even know they could do that. Like, they're not part of our local, right? And nobody told me about this, and so anyway, it's just the. And this is so much bigger than a local resolution now, right? That's what I told him. I'm like, well, I hope you support the divestment, which he didn't in the end. But, this is bigger than a local resolution. And, students across the country are taking over, and I gladly pass the mic. And, the youth movement is so strong, and it's just so inspiring to me. I have my daughter here who's 13, and she wants to... Everybody will be to tell them that we're the ones that control the means of production.
That's right.
All power to the people.
Thank you so much, Christine.
Oh, I just want to add, we join picket lines, we don't cross them.
Thank you so much. Okay, next up we have Ariel. Can you talk about how, as a former tech employee and whistleblower, you organized other tech workers against Project Nimbus? What was that process like? Why has the tech industry been identified as a key target for workplace organizing and campaigns, broadly speaking? And how can other tech workers take up this work? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamar. I feel really honored to be here with all of these incredible people. So I'll start by just naming the context that we are in, which is that we are witnessing history's first AI-enabled genocide. Google is profiting off of making this possible. The IOF is using powerful AI systems to expand its capacity to generate lists of targets for airstrikes and to claim more lives with a single attack than anything we have seen. So this is a reminder for us that public education is a really big part of this organizing work, because when we talk about weapons manufacturers and when we talk about being strategic and putting our bodies on the line to block weapons from getting to Israel, we need to expand our paradigm to include big tech, to include Google, because this has become a war profiteering industry. And this is embodied by Google's Project Nimbus. So Project Nimbus is a $1.2 billion contract between Google, Amazon, the Israeli ministry, government, and military. And it was launched in May of 2021. So it was literally launched during the siege on Gaza that killed over 250 Palestinians. Not a coincidence. And also, not a coincidence that when Google launched this project, they did so in an extremely shady, secretive way, intentionally not speaking to the press about it, not going public about it, attempting to just launch out this extremely profitable extension of Google's relationship with Israel without any sort of, attracting any sort of public knowledge or scrutiny. So for us, shame. So for us as workers in the company, this forced us to not only organize against the contract, but to also start with gathering information about it and exposing that information because of how hard Google was working to suppress that access to information. So what we've learned about Project Nimbus is that the contract requires Google to build out whatever cloud tools and AI tools the Israeli government and military ask for without asking any questions themselves. So Google has no right to regulate or oversee or even know anything about how these tools get used on the ground and which government and military agencies are the beneficiaries of these tools. The contract also stipulates that Google cannot pull out of the contract. So even in the event of opposition or boycott pressure, Google's hands are tied, cannot pull out of the contract. And Google has promised to Israeli officials that the contract will allow for facial detection, automatic image categorization, object tracking, and even sentiment analysis. Word for word, this is what Google engineers said to Israeli military officials. Sentiment analysis, which includes the evaluation of emotional content, detecting if someone is lying, and being able to emotionally evaluate speech and writing. So connect the dots, right? The use cases of this technology from the outset have been very obviously extremely nefarious. From the first moment that we began organizing publicly against Nimbus in 2021, Google has also been blatantly lying to the press about what they are doing through this contract. So immediately after Google ousted me from the company due to protesting Nimbus, a Google spokesperson said to Forbes, New York Times, Business Insider, among several other publications, this disgruntled employee and the protesters are misrepresenting the contract. As we've stated many times, the contract is not directed at highly sensitive or classified military workloads relevant to weapons or intelligence services. So that was back in 2022. Fast forward now to April 2024, 1 month ago. A damning article has just come out in Time magazine, which confirms all of the receipts of what we have always known from the beginning, which is that Project Nimbus has provided the so-called Israeli Ministry of Defense with its own landing zone into Google Cloud, a secure and exclusive entry point to Google's computing infrastructure, allowing multiple units across the IOF to store and process data and access AI services. So in other words, Israel is using Google Cloud to process the massive amounts of data that they need to surveil, target, and murder Palestinians. And so here are just a few of many examples of how this looks in practice. First of all, Google Photos is providing the infrastructure for a new system of mass surveillance that the Zionist entity is using to surveil everyone across Gaza and the West Bank. Second, there is an AI system known as the Gospel, which is designed to mark buildings as targets with no human oversight. The Gospel then pumps out tens of thousands of targets with unprecedented speed, to the extent that one Israeli intelligence officer described it as a mass assassination factory. This is an AI system. Another AI system currently being used in Gaza is called Where's Daddy? That is literally what they're calling it. It is essentially an AI-generated kill list of Palestinian men. An alert gets sent to Israeli intelligence when these AI-marked targets enter their homes, usually at night when their entire families are present, in order for an airstrike to happen at that time. And then the fourth program is called Lavender. This is an AI program that uses machine learning to scan vast amount of data collected from Israel's mass surveillance of Palestinians, which is being fueled by Google Photos. It then uses that data to generate kill lists for military strikes. So the system has already marked as many as, and this was a month ago that this estimate came out, as many as 37,000 Palestinians as alleged militants to be killed. In one strike that was enabled by Lavender, the military was authorized to kill 300 Palestinian civilians in order to target just one alleged militant. So that margin was described by Israeli officials and AI workers, engineers, as collateral damage. So we know that this is not collateral damage. We know that these AI systems are not making mistakes. They are functioning exactly as they were intended to function, which is to allow Israel to fulfill its genocidal intent. That is what these systems are about. So the implications of these genocide profiteering technologies are and have since the beginning been extremely terrifying. And in response, workers of conscience within the company and community members have mobilized tirelessly for the past years to demand an end to Project Nimbus and to disrupt Google's business with the Zionist entity as a whole, because Project Nimbus is just the tip of the iceberg. So we first went public against Nimbus in 2021, launching a campaign called No Tech for Apartheid and circulating open letters and petitions that to date have almost 100,000 signatures, so hopefully we can get to 100,000. Immediately afterwards, Google ousted me from the company in an attempt to stifle worker organizing by creating a chilling effect. But the effect was the opposite, because workers and members of the public just felt kind of more scrutiny and curiosity about why Google is, what are they doing? What could possibly be so nefarious that they would go to extreme lengths to try to sneakily get rid of a random translator? It was just so weird that people are like, what is Google doing? And so more people started to actually get involved. Instead of the chilling effect, it was the opposite, because our very small handful of workers who are public turned almost immediately into dozens and dozens more workers going public. Organizers in the Bay Area and New York and Seattle were organizing direct actions targeting Google offices all across the country. In 2023, organizers in San Francisco successfully shut down the plaza during Google's massive annual cloud conference. This actually was a very successful intervention that caused the company so much humiliation that they've now moved this annual conference to Las Vegas, in large part to insulate from future disruptions. And during the past 2 months, a Google worker named Eddie Hatfield disrupted a Google-sponsored Israeli tech conference in New York City and was immediately fired after. And after that, a group of workers staged a sit-in recently inside the Google Cloud CEO's offices, which led Google to fire 50 workers, including workers who didn't participate or have anything to do with the sit-in, but simply walked by and were bystanders. 2 weeks ago, in response to these violent company behaviors and Google's continued complicity in this genocide, it has expanded Project Nimbus since October 7th with an additional $1 million expansion of the contract. Community organizers in the Bay shut down the entrance to Google's largest annual conference, which drew in a crowd of over 16,000 people. In terms of some of the successes, obviously Project Nimbus continues. Google is doubling down. So while we have not yet succeeded in putting an end to Project Nimbus, the efforts have been very effective at exposing and publicly humiliating Google. And CEO Sundar Pichai, we should know his name and remind him that he will always be known as a genocide profiteer and nothing else. Serving to set a precedent across the industry to show other tech companies what is waiting for them if they pursue similar business, that their workforces will also dissent, that they will face the same types of mass mobilizations as well. So it's about setting precedent. And we have seen that several customers and shareholders have publicly voiced that they are reconsidering their relationship with Google, which is a really important kind of goal, and we hope that this will continue. So those are some of the successes. In terms of some of the challenges and learnings, Google is a multi-trillion-dollar company. I mean, calling it a Zionist company is an understatement. It's an extension of the Zionist entity. The IOF to Google pipeline, it is deeply, deeply entrenched. The ADL is a content monitor for Google. So the ADL actually has power over what gets determined algorithmically as needing to be censored, right? Google's AI ethics principles supposedly protect the public from Google building out AI that would violate widely accepted principles of international law and human rights. Who wrote those principles? Former IOF person who works in Google now. And the head of global security, who sent a letter a few weeks ago warning the entire company about not participating in any more protests, saying you'll be fired too. He was formerly a Navy SEAL and worked in the FBI before Google. So it's a very, very Zionist company, and it's the environment. Even the folks who are not intentionally trying to sabotage or infiltrate or get in the way of anti-Zionist organizing, in many cases have class interests that are at odds with what we are trying to accomplish, right? And Google has sent a very clear message that workers are disposable. That is the message that Google is trying to send. And I think for that reason, we view the pathway forward in this organizing work as being about continuing to build mass power right? Where workers do continue to play a really strategic role, where they leverage their privileged positionality, as in many cases engineers in the company, but work in a way where they are accountable to movement leadership and to movement organizations so that we can build the masses that we need. So in closing, this is going to be a long haul. This is a big fight. And I think I would just close with the fact that Google, through its extension of Project Nimbus, is trying to also send a really clear message to other governments and militaries around the world and to other companies as well, that the business of genocide is a profitable business, and that the tools, the AI tools that are currently being deployed in Gaza, Palestine is being used as a testing ground, as a laboratory to train those tools, to make them smarter so that the first AI-enabled genocide won't be the last. And so that means we need to build power, not just against Google, but the industry as a whole.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Ariel. Next up, we have Brandi. Brandi, can you share what is going on with your Starbucks region and what it has been like to simultaneously build the union and make solidarity with Palestine an integral part of that? Are there any specific tips to organizing in the food service / retail industry that you can share? Thank you.
And all in for shift in my own organizing and campaign work at Starbucks. So I joined the Starbucks campaign, I think, pretty early on. I was in the first 100 stores organized. And to give a little background for what was going on at the time is COVID was still pretty rampant. We were severely understaffed. And in my store specifically, we had a really, really large COVID outbreak, and the 5-day Delta thing was getting into effect, and workers were working on the floor with COVID. And after that, they closed our store down for a renovation and sent us all with COVID to other Starbucks locations. So this is what the company was doing at the time of my initial push to join the Starbucks union. So I've had background in organizing marches on the boss and strikes within the Starbucks campaign, and the foundational work that the Starbucks campaign is that it is rank and file. It is mostly Starbucks workers who have been shaping this campaign, and we are currently in a moment where we are having to reinforce this being a rank and file led movement, and Palestine organizing has been the huge push for that, because it's actually been supporting getting more workers engaged into the work and getting new stores engaged into the work. I walk around at work with my Starbucks Workers United Free Palestine pin, and that is engaging conversation with non-union Starbucks workers who are interested in not supporting genocide, because we have morals and we have dignity and we want to be supporting that, even if we are just serving coffee. But to talk a little bit about our organizing with Palestine that happened at my local and how we got involved into that, was we were essentially thrusted into it because of the company's doxing of all union stores after we stood in solidarity with Palestine almost a couple of days after the October 7th attack. We literally came out with the most basic statement, literally solidarity with Palestine. And our union leadership got upset. They removed the tweet. Starbucks sued us, said we were supporting terrorists, and put a lot of pressure on our union leadership to then like quell anything that we were going to talk about Palestine. But our workers were not content with that, and we came out with a statement in solidarity with Palestine, initially just calling really for humanitarian aid. We had to push for that statement really, really hard to be at a national level. Our staff persons were in the meetings with Palestinian workers. We have Palestinian workers on the shop floor. We have Arab workers on the plant floor. We have workers who are affected by this directly helped shape that statement and were cognizant of the fact that they were towing a political line. They held back some of their own personal beliefs to get that statement through and to make it something that like people would agree to and wouldn't be, but they still prevented us from coming out with a ceasefire statement after the fact. We had one slated for January that never went public because our union leadership were concerned that bargaining would be stopping with the company. But unfortunately for them, that's not how bargaining works. We need to continue to put pressure on companies, and the way we're going to put pressure on companies is by supporting Palestine and by supporting all the work that y'all have been doing on our behalf, essentially. So that tweet caused a lot of drama in the campaign and in like the labor movement, I think. So what we did at the local level in response to that is because our stores were doxxed and we are in New York City, so there are some Zionist strongholds in various pockets of that city, is we had workers who were then like, because our staff and our leadership were more concerned about the PR logistics of it, didn't want to give the workers the resource to handle the pressure that they were getting back now at the shop floor, because we are very public facing. So people were having Zionists coming into their stores and harassing them over a statement that some of the rank and file workers didn't even know happened. And that is like how it is sometimes, you know? And they were facing the consequences of something that ultimately like they didn't have. People who were wearing hijabs on the floor were getting an insane increase in Islamophobic comments on the shop floor from customers. So our union staff and our union leadership heard that and then proceeded to kind of be like, oh, well, like, you know, it is what it is. But my fellow workers and I were not content with that. And this is why I think PYM so much is we reached out and connected with PYM to get the Palestinian perspective and to get some trainings off the ground to teach our workers how to stand up for themselves and how to, you know, protect themselves from Zionism, but also like, you know, do it in a way in which they're not preventing a Palestinian liberation movement, in the way that they're supporting Palestine while protecting themselves. So at our local level, we were able to, you know, start with like kind of a political education moment between PYM, local New York City chapter, and our campaign, and just kind of share like why we think this is important and like have a conversation. But then we had a whole day of like Palestinian political education to our rank and file workers who are like, were not initially a part of that statement and are suddenly now like supporting Palestine on their shop floors every day, wearing the Starbucks Workers United Palestine pin. And that has helped us continue to build momentum and like educate workers and educate the people who are at the end of the day going to be talking to people and talking to more people who are not even like organized in any manner, right? Like that's how you're going to shape any sort of liberation movement, is by having people talking about it.
Yep.
And it's given us a resource to continue like expanding this to the national scale. Like recently, Starbucks Workers United got invited to the SCIU convention, which I don't know how well you guys know SCIU, but we love SCIU rank and file. They're neoliberal union who's very informative in their outreach or organizing, and Starbucks workers with support of rank and file from SCIU membership. SCIU did this terrible thing and invited Kamala Harris to speak at it. Workers were not happy with that. We wanted Kamala out of our convention hall. And we had about a representation of about 12 Starbucks workers who were there for other reasons, who interrupted and disrupted Kamala Harris's speech. And then sat down. And it was not outside agitators. We were doing this in support of what already SEIU is doing. And this is like a hopeful, huge shift that like from the foundation of our union and from the foundation of our contract, that it can be inherently anti-Zionist from the get-go. That we can be anti-colonial from the get-go. That we are standing for a workers' liberation movement from the get-go. And we're in this very strategic opportunity here at Starbucks at Starbucks Workers United, not Starbucks. Starbucks, whatever it wants to be. But we can be that from the get-go, and we have this opportunity because the rank and file are so engaged with the union campaign now. I mean, I'm a rank and file worker myself. I'm a barista. I did not. I was part of the community that completed the political education training from PYM. I just knew that it was important to represent that, you know? And especially with contract negotiations, to put these principles into our union from its birth and from its history. And we need to continuously fight for that, and the support that is in this room for us to do that has been wonderful and deeply appreciative of it. And I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I genuinely do not think the company would be bargaining with us if it were not for the crisis that it is in now, and that it was a combination of our union effort, the boycotts, and many other things that Starbucks is just making bad choices with, which I guess that's good for me. But that's what is getting us to a negotiation table, and that's what can shift the labor movement. This is going to be one of the first fast food contracts, and we have no idea what the repercussions of this moment is. But that's why it's so important to have solidarity with each other, even if we don't know what's going to happen, but to have this moment of solidarity with each other, because we can look back on it and be like, they were still trying. And that this can be the beginning of something wonderful for the not just Palestinian liberation, but the U.S. labor movement in general. Second question about tactics for organizing fast food workers and retail workers. But fundamentally what you need is shop floor engagement. You need workers on the floor every day who are unfortunately good at their jobs. I mean that genuinely, because people respect those workers on the floor, and they will go to them with questions about the company, and when they go to them to questions about the company, you then answer other questions. At my store, you also want to fundamentally just build relationships. Fast food workers do not have the time, I'm jealous of Marcelina for talking about her monthly meetings where 100+ people. We have our own regional organizing meeting where we do have elected people, but it is not, because of the precarity of our job and our situation, it is not an expectation to have fast food workers be able to consistently attend those and coordinate that, right? So what you need to do is be ready to have shop floor conversations at all times. I'm saying you are always have to be organizing if you're doing retail or fast food organizing. You are on the floor, always ready to talk about your union, to talk about whatever that person that you're interacting with has a question about. And it's a lot of work, it's a lot of training, but that's why we need spaces like these where we can come together and we can, stand in solidarity, and you can be around people who understand what that is. But when you're talking with people who don't understand what that is, you have to be ready to have those conversations. And it's hard and it is uncomfortable sometimes. But people respect the genuineness that comes from that. When my union campaign started, it was not about revolution or anything. What it was fundamentally about was we have terrible working conditions, shitty working conditions. I was short-staffed. We would be doing 3-person plays while in places the Starbucks word for how many people are on the floor essentially. We would do 3-person plays and be having to maintain COVID benefits, COVID safety standards, and it was just not, it was untenable. And it was terrible conditions. And people were sick, we were getting customers sick, and we still to this day also don't always have the opportunity to maintain the level of cleanliness in order to give good food safety, you know what I mean? And that's because Starbucks is continuously cutting hours and continuously, creating problems with scheduling, right? But even with all that, we still have the opportunity to stand together to communicate with each other, and build relationships with people, because that does build relationships, right? Like, everybody at my store knows that if they have a problem, they can come communicate about me, and I will figure out a way to do it. We will figure it out together, not just me. We will have that conversation, and people need to know that. You just need to have someone who is willing to have a conversation. Fundamentally, I think is what it is about. That's what it is. It's building relationships, and it's being willing to talk to people. And I don't know any more advice I could give for that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandi. We love you here. All right. Last but certainly not least, Yajaira. United Educators of San Francisco, of which you are a member leader, passed a resolution supporting BDS in 2021 and calling for a ceasefire in November 2023. Please talk about the work leading up to these important resolutions and your view of organizing within our unions in solidarity for Palestine. Thank you. Woo, let's go. How are you doing today? Where are the organizers? Where are you? Where are the union leaders at? And the educators? And the workers? And the revolutionaries? That's right. So first I just want to say I'm so honored and humbled to be with you all. This is a really critical phase that we are in for the Palestinian struggle. And you are here. You, your friends, your family members, your co-workers, your comrades, you're here today. And so in answering this question, right, I can tell you about the resolution, but I want to tell you how we got there. Because as organizers and as revolutionaries, we need to know our history. We need to go back and understand in order to be able to consolidate all our learnings and move forward for what's to come. So first, I'll give you some context, and I'm going to move this closer to me. I'll start by talking a little bit about United Educators of San Francisco, UESF. Okay, so UESF represents over 6,000 workers in the San Francisco Unified School District. And we're really unique. I'm just going to hold it. We're really unique because we represent pre-K to 12 teachers, paraeducators, social workers, nurses, counselors, teacher librarians, you name it. It's the entire school community. What's unique about us, and very different from many other public school districts, is that our certificated educators, those teachers that hold a credential and are able to work in public education schools, we are also in the same union as our para-educators, our classified folks. That's right. And I say that because that is extremely important for the story that I'm going to share with you about our contract campaign that started in 2025. Okay, so a little bit, you heard a little bit about UESF, who we represent. Okay, so I'm going to go back to spring 2021, when rank and file members brought forth the resolution in solidarity with the Palestinian people, which called for three things at that time. And actually, that correlates with what Ariel was talking about in May 2021. That was a direct response that our rank and file members were saying no tech for our apartheid, that they were standing against that Google contract. And that's one of the reasons why this resolution came forth. So I'm making that connection, right? Because even though Ariel was over there in her workplace, we were here in ours as educators wanting to stand up for our Palestinian students and our families, and making the connection that this issue actually does impact our lived realities here in our own home. And so what this BDS resolution called for was, 1, an end to the bombardment on Gaza. 2, was calling on Joe Biden to end all aid to Israel. And then 3, was calling for a demand to take a stance on the divestment
boycotts, divestment, and sanctions that was being called internationally by other workers. And so while this was happening, UESF was also running its internal elections for the next executive board. And there was a slate called the Organizing for Union Power Slate, also known as OUP, that had just successfully ran on the slate and won that election. So all of this has a lot to do with what I'm about to share, right? So the OUP slate was running on 4 pillars of unity. 1, fully funded and equitable schools. Leadership development, so developing its members, its rank and file. Building a fighting union, and building coalition and community power. So those were the 4 pillars. And the vision was for UESF to transform internally, from moving away from being a service model union to an organizing model union. And I'll explain that really briefly, because I got more to share. A service model union, what that looks like is that a worker pays their union dues and they can expect union leadership to take care of their issues for them. For example, grievances. Now, an organized model union is the workers are engaged, just like what Brandi was talking about, right? On the her baristas working the shifts, having those conversations. That's what an organized union looks like, right? We are talking to our members, we're engaged, and we are solving our own problems. After all, that is what a union is, right? You and your coworkers coming together to make demands of the boss on the wages and conditions you and your coworkers want to see. So naturally, because of this slate, the writers of the BDS resolution asked members of the OUP slate to sign on to this resolution, and so we did. The too long didn't read version of that was that this resolution just barely passed the UESF assembly with an attempt to replace it with a Zionist substitute resolution. Yeah. That later in that assembly meeting, we actually learned that was written by non-UESF members, actually. Yeah. Now, a lesson that I really want to share with you all is you probably have heard that when we fight, we win, right? All right. But when we fight, we also learn. Yes. And what the assembly meeting taught the OUP slate that night was that our own union's internal structure needed to shift to organizing our members in order to continue building union power, and one that stood with the Palestinian people. Because that resolution, that assembly meeting was a structured test, right? It told us where our members were at. We just barely made it, and there was a counter resolution, right? That was Zionist in nature. That was not what we wanted it to be. So we knew that we had a lot of work to do. So I say this because as workers, we don't just fight for improved working conditions or living conditions or do the daily things like defend our contract, right? We must, as workers, respond to the call to fight for oppressed workers everywhere in the world. And we must bring awareness to the broader international issues that have a direct connection to our lived realities here at home. As an educator, I experienced the impacts of defunded classrooms, of understaffed schools. I'm a social worker, and what society tells me, what this capitalist society tells me, is that it taught me to fix the failures of capitalism, of racism, of poverty. Shame, right? And that in my 7.5-hour workday, I'm supposed to fix all of it. And that it doesn't impact me when I go home. We have a special responsibility to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people because of what was shared earlier, the billions of dollars that our government sends to dehumanize, to kill, and destroy the Palestinian people and their lands. Those billions can and should be spent on public education. It should be spent on dignified housing, on dignified healthcare for all, and other public goods, right? Not on war and occupation and the killing of over 30,000 Palestinians.
Shame.
So to answer part of the question, my views on organizing our unions to stand in solidarity with Palestine means that organized labor must be oriented politically. To build internationalism among their co-workers, we must be highly disciplined and organized to talk to every single worker that we come across. Union leaders and members must have those one-on-one structured organizing conversations to learn about the interests and the needs of their co-workers. They can't make the connections to why we need to fight for Palestine if they can't identify the limitations of their own conditions here at home. Once the issues are identified, then it is the role of the organizer to help guide their co-workers into making the connection of why their own struggles here at home are deeply tied into the Palestinian struggle. So after that resolution passed in the summer of 2021, the Organizing for Union Power slate, we came into leadership, and that's exactly how we started to transform our union, right? We started to identify, like Brandi had mentioned earlier, who are the workers that people respect? Who are the workers that are good at their jobs, that people trust, that we know we can test them and win a majority at their work sites, right? Who are those workers? And so we started building union leadership at all of our school sites and our work sites. Now, another thing that we did is internally, we also shift the internal structures of UESF and adopted a budget that actually mirrored the goals that we were trying to do to be an organizing union. And so that actually is what helped us lead into the fall 2022 to have a 60-plus member bargaining team. The biggest bargaining team in UESF history. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details of that bargain because I'm being mindful of time, but one of the biggest things that we walked away with was in that bargain and our platform, we said that we wanted to have meaningful and equitable raises for all, especially our para-educators. Because the discrepancy was so large. And all of that involved a lot of organizing, a lot of structured one-on-one conversations, and rallies. Okay, I'm gonna hurry up. So originally, the district only gave us the $35 million package, but we walked away with $187 million. And so as I end, why does all of this matter? Well, this bargain, the way that we shifted UESF's culture and our structures is what allow us to then be in a position in November 2023 to pass with a supermajority our ceasefire resolution. Because all the organizing we had done, all the skill sets, we used all our organizing muscles to then tap into the more progressive members that we had, right? To make sure that they send an assembly member delegate to that meeting to be able to pass. And in this assembly meeting, we didn't just have one substitute resolution, we had two. We didn't just have a Zionist counter substitute resolution, we also had a neoliberal one as well. But our members could see past that, and that was only done because of the organizing, because of the struggle that we were a part of, right? And so, while our resolutions have contributed greatly to the struggle for a free Palestine, we know that it cannot end there. Like all of you here today, we need to recommit ourselves into this next phase of the struggle, because in the past 8 months, you all have experienced rapid shift in consciousness and political growth through the struggle for a free Palestine. You all attended rallies, encampments, forums, etc. You're here today, right? And so in order to take the next step to bring Palestine into your workplace, it doesn't even matter if it's your workplace, any condition, any space that you're a part of, you need to start talking to people. You need to start having those one-on-one conversations and guide them into making the connections of how their own realities here at home how they're connected to the other broader issues. So I'm going to end in a chant, because I'm a unionist. And I'm going to say when we fight, and you're going to say we win. Ready? Yeah. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. That's right. So please get your questions up and running, and we're going to take a few at a time, and then y'all can answer. So we have one person with a mic here. Wow, there's not a question.
Hello, my name is Brandi. I work with the Colorado Springs People's Coalition, and I'm a founding member. I'm a founding member of Colorado College Alumni for Palestine, and I was looking to get your guys' thoughts on how to get administration in the workplace, in academia, to stop like kicking the can down the road, if that makes sense. Like how to get them to stop saying it's out of our hands. The money is not in our hands. Especially like as a union, how do you pressure people to be accountable and to therefore like pressure their higher ups? Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I organize in Houston, Texas, and I'm wondering, how do you organize with immigrant communities that have the very valid fear of legal repercussions, especially when they're going through their citizenship process? It's a very valid fear. In Houston, Texas, we have a large immigrant community, and they're often the most exploited communities. And a lot of them are still holding on to that American dream. So how do we begin to have those conversations and let them understand that they do have power, that there are options, that there is something that they can do? How do we organize these communities? Thank you.
I wanted to ask, how have you guys contended with Zionist workers in your union and people who are sowing discord and basically almost like sabotaging the progress of the union because of their Zionist politics? I ask this just for context because I'm a healthcare worker in New York City, and as you, most people here know, like New York is a real huge like Zionist stronghold. And also being a healthcare worker, I'm a physician, so physicians comprise a very bourgeois, kind of bourgeois, they have very like petty bourgeois class politics. So yeah, organizing amongst people who are Zionists and who also are like petty bourgeois, I kind of wonder how you've contended with those things.
Okay, if the panelists want to tackle any of those, and then we'll take another round.
Thank you for those questions. I guess about the first question, how did you deal with management or union leadership even? Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about the pushback, and even addressing the question about workers who were Zionists. And, when this resolution first passed, like I said, like not soon after our local electeds, on the E-board, were getting calls and being asked to go speak at events that they weren't even aware of. Actually, our president was at the CAP conference in DC for UAW when this union meeting happened with the resolution passed, so he wasn't even aware of it. So I guess it kind of caught him off guard, and he's the type of person who doesn't like things happening behind his back, right? He needs to know about it in advance, whatever. But we're cool for the most part. You know, after that, like I said, the pushback happened, and they wanted me to take the post down, which didn't happen, you know, or you can't, right? You can't remove it from the internet. But so, and then I hear about that the resolution was possibly being retracted or rescinded. I'm like, what's going on with that? But you know, so I'm like, hey, what's the deal? You know, or I even asked if our local would endorse or support this conference, and they said no. But then he asked me to speak, or President asked me to speak at the Chicago Teachers Union Hall to represent, you know, the Palestine, the resolution from 551. Like, so yeah, it's when it's convenient for them, right? Like, so just keep doing the work no matter what. You know, they're gonna try to censor you and silence you. And this is not the old UAW, right? Because of UAWD and Members United, you know, we have elections now for our leadership, and we're gonna hold them accountable. So yeah, just keep fighting and doing the work. And so yeah, I did have a couple hateful comments on our private, like, social groups when I posted the resolution, and I try to ignore all the trolls anyway, but there's a couple of them that I do know. I mean, I try to talk to everyone. Like, being in the trades, you know, as a minority, you know, we all know trades are male, pale, and stale, right? And it's true. I mean, I've been in this 25 years, and it's getting better, but it could be a lot better. So I will talk to a lot of people, like, a lot of our trades people are right-wing Republicans, but I'll still try to have these difficult conversations with them, you know. But I think because I kind of talk to everyone and I'm friendly, you know, they'll listen to me. They don't always agree, but at least they're listening, and it doesn't always have to be a fight or confrontation, which sometimes, you know, I will do that. That you don't get anywhere if you do that. You know, even fighting with people in my own family, it's like there's no point, you know. So, anyway.
Hello. Okay. To answer the first question, these are all really great questions, so I'm going to try to go quickly on some of them. Start engaging in small fights. I think finding the points of leverage. Where do you, as a people, as a group, where do you have leverage? And then begin to, you know, apply pressures on those. I think one very, very, clear example of how we have seen this has actually been with the student encampments. Right? The students, they didn't just decide, they had to organize themselves. They had to find the people, right? They had to have those conversations and then come together. And that's why it was such a school for struggle, because they were doing all of this learning within days, sometimes within hours. One thing that UESF did, or some of our members, we actually went to some of these encampments to give trainings on negotiations. So find those people, right? Build coalition. Who are the other union locals around you that you can, you know, organize with? Who are the other groups? Who is the organized group on campus, or, you know, around wherever you're living or wherever you're working? The other thing I wanted to address was the Zionist workers in your union, because this is something I definitely experienced directly. Zionists have emailed me. I was one of the writers for a ceasefire resolution. And there was a Zionist member that had posted all our names on social media, and so now, you know, everyone can find our work email online. And something that I have to remember is for myself, like, why I am doing this, right? And so anytime I'm having conversations with my coworkers and my colleagues, we have to ground ourselves in that reality of why we're in this and recommit every single time, whether that's our staff meeting. You know, and I think sometimes what is really hard, and I will say it's a real tension that exists, there are members who don't know much yet about Palestine, and we don't cut them off, right? But I think it's also like us being confident, because we're leaders of our workplaces, being confident and to be able to hold that tension and that fear that sometimes comes, because I have had coworkers tell me, like, I'm scared for my safety. And I'm like, okay, we got to talk about that. That's valid, yes, and there aren't any universities left in Gaza right now. How many children have died? How many children have not made it to their first birthday? We need to contextualize it and continue to talk about that with our workers so that then they build that confidence and together fight off the Zionists. What we have seen though, when you start winning your coworkers, the Zionists then are a minority.
Yes.
And that is actually when we go to our meetings now, they don't even say anything anymore because they continue to expose themselves.
I'll start with the first question about like kicking the can down the road. I think it's like fundamentally it's about like building an escalation plan and building like a strategy to like get them to feel the pressure. So like in the Starbucks campaign, my district manager also doesn't really realistically have that much power, right? But if I annoy them enough about it, they're going to start annoying their manager. You know what I mean? Like if I'm making it as uncomfortable as possible for them to exist at my store, they're not going to come visit my store, and then they're going to start getting harassed by managers about why they're not coming or something like that. And I mean, to also tie it to like CUNY Gaza encampment, I was helping with that. But they did that at the grad center. Like they took over the whole like first floor of the grad center in the city, and they got the president of the grad center to reach out to the chancellor of CUNY broadly. So like there are like ways to like, if you can target them and make them uncomfortable, make them force them to make a decision, like it's about that. And then I guess there was someone asked a question about how to organize people who are in like really precarious situations, particularly like undocumented folks. One is like coordinate with some legal. I mean, I don't know what's the situation in Texas, but like in New York, like there are orgs that can help like with risk analysis for those people so that they can understand like what risks they're actually taking and what's going on. So finding organizations that would support that, and then also organize their kids, because their kids are gonna go home and like talk about stuff like that. Like that's kind of like, if you, like, which maybe that's us, but like you organize their kids, and like most of their kids can also be like high school, college age, you know what I mean? So they're already probably tapped into this work in some capacity, but like using that like dynamic really helps. And I've like met a great union leader who was actually organized by her child. Like her child was getting into some union stuff, and then she was like, "Well, my kid's doing it." So like it does work that. And then regarding like Zionist people within your union and within your workplace, I mean fundamentally they're gonna be crazy. They're gonna pop off and be crazy. So if you just gray rock, which is like a term like where you just don't give them any emotional response, they're gonna get really upset. And this is a thing in food service in general. Like if you don't give people the response they're expecting, they're just gonna make themselves look even worse. So I think that's like what you would do. Like that's what we like when we handle like that's more customer facing than like in my union, because our union is really young and very queer, so we kind of have a little bit of an advantage. But when I interact with customers, usually it's just like don't give them the response that they want, and you'll be surprised at how quiet they get.
And then I can respond a little to the last question about like dealing with class privileged Zionist counterparts in the workplace. Very similar to what Brandi was just saying. At least in Google, the Zionists who are the most vocal and the most active, they are usually not acting alone. They have deep affiliations with oppositional forces. So they're not just showing up as Google workers. They're employed by Google, but they're deeply affiliated with all sorts of different oppositional forces, institutional, state, Zionist, etc. And they are very unhinged, and part of what they're trying to achieve is not just to harass in order to kind of scare you or intimidate you, it's also to waste your time, honestly, because they know that the time that you spend engaging with them on company fora, it's not only exposing you to potential recourse or retaliation from HR because you start to have a paper trail that they can then weaponize against you. It's also just to bog you down because they know that the hours upon hours that you spend engaging, which is what happens every single day in Google and so many other companies, all of those hours you spend engaging, you're not focusing on the cause. You're not actually, like in this case, Project Nimbus, you're not really focusing on ending Project Nimbus, you're focusing on battling it out with these Zionists who are being extremely strategic in how they use your time. So I think what you just said, like that makes a lot of sense. Every single conversation you have with the Zionist counterpart, be like, is this conversation really furthering my cause? Or am I just building out more content that could be weaponized against me? And that really isn't a good use of my time. And then pivot and focus on what the cause is. And then the other thing I think is like trying not to like speak their language in our organizing and not to play by their rules or within their frameworks in our organizing. So like one example of that is a lot of big tech organizing, and particularly with Google, the focus has been on proving to Google that Project Nimbus is in violation of Google's AI ethics principles. But again, the AI ethics principles were literally written by a former IOF person, right? Or there's a lot of, when people are thinking through these strategies, it's a lot of like, okay, we have to engage as, in a business manner. This is a place of business, so we have to be very diplomatic, which is really kind of anti-militancy. It's very like, we have to show up, we have to send these emails, we have to do these petitions. They don't work. Like, the emails don't work, the petitions don't work, the meetings don't work. I mean, the responsible AI team at Google, it literally rolls up into Israel's Google offices. So the idea that you can just have these conversations in a diplomatic manner is not true. And when Google fired over 50 workers for just having anything to do with the sit-ins, they said in the letter, this is a place of business, so we do not accept any sort of behavior that does not match what would be expected of a place of business. But at Google, you can literally get your manicure and pedicure done, you can get a massage done, they have nap rooms, you can bring your laundry to work, you can get all of your meals served to you, right? So is that characteristic of a place of business, right? Like trying to follow Google's rules and working within those frameworks, I don't think that matters. And I think Tamar was asking when we were talking, like, what would you have done differently? I think escalating into a much more militant approach a lot earlier on would have been something. And I think the way that Brandi was saying, like without PYM, the work that we're doing wouldn't have been possible. Like the interventions that we've had that have been the most successful, PYM has played such a pivotal role in mobilizing the masses, and the coalition, like, speaking from the Bay Area perspective, which is where big tech is headquartered, has played such an instrumental role in helping the workers within Google to understand how to leverage their positionality and bring out the masses.
Sounds like they don't want you to have a union at Google.
We're going to take 2 more questions. I'm really sorry, but we'll focus on this side of the room.
Hey everyone, my name is Desmond. I'm a 4811 member. So as many of you know, us at 4811, we're going on this unfair labor practice strike. We're already on it. At UCLA, I'm going to fly back and be on the picket line on Tuesday. And we have like our core leadership, which of course, our elected officers and our worker leaders generally, who are fully on board, like with the strike, the importance of the strike, the historic importance of the strike. But we're also, over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because a month ago, we didn't think this was even possible, right? The conditions didn't exist. There wasn't even an encampment at UCLA a month ago, and now we're going on strike for our workers' rights to, be in this movement, to defend this movement. And like I said, our leadership, elected officers, core, like worker leaders, rank and file leaders are on board, but in the last 2 weeks, we really had to go hard in getting our membership active and involved. And so I guess my question for everybody is, how do you think about moving towards majority action, reflections on getting to all of your workers who may be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, to the Palestinian movement, but don't necessarily act, right? They might support a statement, but how do we get them out in the streets to think about these really escalatory actions? So just any thoughts and reflections you have on your work, and your very important work in labor doing that.
Thank you so much.
I think for the sake of time, we'll just take one question to give the panelists time to answer.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, yeah, that's one thing, right? Getting somebody to support a resolution is one thing, right? They'll support it, vote on it, but getting them to act, that's totally different. And I get it. You know, we all have families and things we do, and we're busy with our lives. You know, I just tell them, like, okay, well, if you don't want to get involved, it's only going to get worse, right? People are tired. We're working every day, long hours, everything, costs more, inflation. And like, yeah, well, these are all related. These issues are all related, and this is why, and even with, climate change, roads are getting flooded and workers can't even make it to work on time. And, we had in Chicago, we can smell the wildfires from Canada. And it was to the point where I stepped out of work to get some fresh air, and the air inside the plant was better than outside, and yeah, you can complain. I work in the paint shop, which is very toxic already. And, we complain about working conditions and safety, but then we go outside and we can't even breathe, And what's contributing to this? War. And me using a reusable water bottle is going to make an impact as much as a company not providing jet fuel for these huge aircrafts and machines. Just try to think of the bigger picture. And, say like someone's like, well, I got, my kids are doing this weekend. I'm like, bring them to the march. I had my nephew with me one weekend. My daughter and her cousin, they're really close, and his dad is, Marine and not very supportive of my efforts, but whatever, we talk and we get along. But I told him, my nephew was with us at this rally. I'm like, you should show your dad what you did today, Like, anyway, just like I said, bring the family along, and if you want, like, that can be your quality time, but also making a difference, because we just can't stand by any longer.
I mean, obviously most pressing stuff that Marcy said, but like making it we're younger, so making it like a friend group thing is really like the way to do it. Like, this is like the activity we're doing, is we're going, and because we haven't coordinated any like strikes for Palestine, but we do have like a pocket of people who go to Palestine protests in New York City. And we go together, and it's like sometimes it's riskier than other days. There's some that are like more kind of corporatized, and those are easier to get people to come to be honest, because it's like, oh, it's a nice day out, like you're gonna be in here anyway. And it's about like capitalizing on like those friendships that are already like organically formed, and being like, okay, if I convince this person, they're gonna want to bring a friend. So it's just about strategizing who you're asking to, and who's like the I hate to be it, but like, especially if you're on the shop floor, you kind of know who the organic leader of a friend group is. Get that person. be like that person is gonna coordinate the friend group naturally. If you can convince them to do an activity, you can probably get 4 or 5 other people to do the activity.
Sorry, I keep forgetting this is off. That's a really great question. I think in my experience, it really, I'm thinking about currently the recent bargaining campaign that we were a part of. And there's a lot of points that came up, but one of them was, one way that we wanted to ensure that every single rank and file member knew exactly what was happening in the campaign is that we actually ended up doing updates, not just written updates, but video updates of every single action that we were doing. And not just that, we took it a step further. We actually had all the site leaders. It was an expectation that you were to give an update at your work or school site. At the end of every bargaining session, you had to give an update. We had the video, you had the report. There were no excuses. In our bargaining team, I mentioned, we didn't just have 60 plus members on that. We also had the contract action team come in, and they were a part of watching that happen. Now, I think to break it down a little bit more, they have to test the rosters, right? You print out the rosters, you tell the site leaders, identify the other leaders at your school site that are going to talk to these 5 workers, right? Identify who is the hardest to move worker at your site. Because a lot of the times, the hardest to move members are actually the leaders a lot of the times. And so identifying those so that then the work gets delegated, because the core leadership, right, y'all have a lot on your plate. You're on calls 24/7, right, on top of your job. So distributing that labor and that one-on-one organizing really helps. But yeah, that was just like a really quick way that my experience.
All right. Well, that concludes the Q&A section. Thank you all so much. Please give a huge round of applause. Huge round of applause. Thank you all so much.